This video is brought to you by Magic Spoon.
Terrible weapon, the Gladiator Hispaniensis. Didn't have any blood runnels, so there's no way for the air to come out of a wound and no way for the blood to run out of a wound either. So therefore, when the sword went in, it was very difficult to take out. So you had to give it a massive twist, which created a terrible, terrifying wound. So it was a psychological weapon.
I can't believe he said that. Do what? I can't believe it. Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and a huge chunk of this channel is dedicated to Roman history. That is because ancient Rome is one of my greatest passions, and even though I don't consider myself to be an expert of Roman history and I'm not a fully fledged historian, researching ancient Rome is one of my greatest pastimes. It's something I enjoy doing, and that is why I've got so many videos on ancient Rome. Now today we've got a review of a movie set in ancient Rome made by an actual historian, and we're going to review the review. Now, as I say, this is a real historian we're talking about, so I suppose I still haven't watched it, but I'm sure there will be many things that I will learn from this this expert. But then again, you noble ones gave me the link to this video, so usually you don't do that unless there is something wrong in the review. So I don't know. Anyways, let's check it out.
I'm Spartacus. If I'm being really honest, actually, that I've had to try really hard to get Pompeii wrong. Fantastic! Absolute rubbish. My name is Dr. Simon Elliott, historian, archaeologist and broadcaster, and today I'm going to be reviewing Roman movies.
Well, he's already got a British accent, so that's perfect for Roman movies, I suppose. That's accurate.
From the movie Gladiator.
Gladiator.
There is the Marcomannic king holding the head up.
Oh, I know I've got a few things to say about Gladiator. I mean, great movie, don't get me wrong, but when it comes to his story, well, I'm sure he will point out a lot of things.
So Maximus was actually a real general. He was a contemporary of Septimius Severus.
As far as I understand, though, the character Maximus Decimus Meridius is still a fictional character. It's kind of based on something that existed, but as far as I understand, he is fictional.
Kit's not bad, so I'm going to guess that's leather, but actually it's meant to be lorica segmentata, which is banded iron armour, which is accurate for this period of the Principate Roman Empire. Okay,
I'm surprised that this is all he's going to say about the kit, because for me, what the Roman soldiers are wearing in terms of armour, weapons, I suppose now it's just focusing on the armour, is a big thing. Like, first of all, the helmets that they're wearing do not look like, particularly the back of the helmets do not look like those extant examples that we've got. But then again, this could be considered to be nitpicking, but let's talk about what he just said about the lorica segmentata. And I have something to say about the Latin as well. You'll see in a minute. Yes, at this time of the Principate, lorica segmentata, so the armor that you see right there, was in use. So is it correct for us to see lorica segmentata being used by these soldiers of this specific time period? Absolutely agree with him. Still, the one thing that I think would have been important to point out in this case is that it's ubiquitous. And it shouldn't have been. Like, as far as we understand, except for maybe some specific battles or some specific situations in the Romans had to face very strong missile fire from the opponents, it wouldn't have been a situation of every single soldier is now wearing lorica segmentata. That is a movie prop, not to mention the fact that every single soldier is wearing the exact same helmet. And that level of uniformity is not historically accurate. We should see soldiers wearing hamatas or mail, even some soldiers wearing scale. We should definitely see lots of different kinds of helmets, some of which would have still been bronze, others would have been iron in this case, of course. Now, of course, we're talking about a film, this is not a documentary, so I'm not like attacking or critiquing the film, but I'm saying if someone wants to ask an expert, so is this historically accurate? That's what you're asking. And to give a good answer to that question, the first thing to say is there is too much uniformity in the army, and not every single soldier should look exactly like a Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V type of situation. And now I'd like to take a moment to mention the kind sponsor that made this video possible, Magic Spoon. I'm really happy to be able to present to you this brand because both my wife and I really like it. Magic Spoon cereals have 0 grams of sugar, 13 or 14 grams of protein, and only 4 to 5 net grams of carbs in each serving. Honey Nut has 1 gram of sugar. While Magic Spoon cereal bars have 1 gram of sugar, 10 grams of protein, 4 net grams of carbs, and only 130 calories per bar, only 140 calories per serving. They're also keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and low-carb. Also, they've got a lot of flavors available, but my favorite is chocolate. Growing up, cereal was one of my favourite types of food for breakfast, but I had to give it up because I realised it was full of sugars and junk that you're not really supposed to eat. Now, I personally really like Magic Spoon because it gives me an opportunity to start training again. As you know, I used to train, but then I stopped, unfortunately. But the thing is that since Magic Spoon gives me an opportunity to eat something high in protein, which also doesn't really have carbs, which allows me to control the amount of carbs that I want to have in my diet, and it tastes really good. It's a great input for me to start again training because I'm thinking, well, I'm having this protein now, I might as well train. So click the link in the description below and get your own Magic Spoon cereal box today. You can build your very own variety box and can choose from the best-selling cocoa, fruity, roasted, peanut butter, cookies and cream and maple waffle flavors, plus other awesome flavors including honey nut, blueberry muffin and cinnamon roll. You can even add the cookies and cream and cocoa peanut butter flavor cereal bars to your variety box. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link below and use the code Metatron for $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/Metatron to save $5 off your order today. And big thanks to Magic Spoon for sponsoring my video. Also, sorry if I'm getting a little nitpicky, this is the language training part of my, I suppose, academic background, and I hope it doesn't make me sound too pedantic, but there is a reason behind it, so please wait for it. But the way he and every other historian and all Roman reenactors who are Anglophone pronounce Lorica segmentata. He says
leather, but actually it's meant to be Lorica segmentata.
This is a genuine question I'm asking. I'm not trying to be a prick, but what's the point in using Latin if you don't know how to pronounce Latin? Now, of course, this guy didn't say, he's a historian, an archaeologist, not a linguist, so it's not like I should expect him to know Latin, but then why use it? As I am a historical reenactor as well, and I noticed that a lot of historical reenactors say this, Lorica segmentata. And one thing that is dramatically important in Latin is called phonemic vowel length. So how long a vowel is, or how short a vowel is, will have a semantic weight. So it will change the meaning of a word. This specific word in Latin is lorica. So both the O and the E are supposed to be long. Why don't you just say armor? Why do you decide to use Latin but you don't research the pronunciation? And again, this is a genuine question. You don't need to use Latin. I like using Latin, but then I review the pronunciation first, just like I like using Japanese and I review the pronunciation first. The only reason I can see of using Latin when you're talking about Roman history is to create immersion, but the Romans didn't call it segmentata. Segmentata is a modern term. So immersion is out the window already. I understand it can feel nitpicky, but mine is a real question. I'm more than happy to create a tutorial on how to pronounce in classical Latin all the words that are usually connected to Roman history and Roman historical reenactment. If you're interested in that, let me know, and I'll do a collaboration with Luca Ranieri at Scorpio Martianus. And before people tell me it's a dead language so no one can know how it was pronounced, the Romans told us. They literally marked what vowels were supposed to be long and what vowels were supposed to be short. I will leave a link in the description below where I justify every single specific pronunciation in classical Latin that I use on my videos. Let's move forward.
I love this quote. Russell Crowe's absolutely on his A game in this movie.
I agree.
They go to the forming testudo to take the fire from the Germans, which is accurate. Something's wrong here in the sequence that's about to happen, though, in the way the legionaries engage. So the legionaries should stop about 100 meters away from the Germans, and each legionary should throw his lighter pillar, lead-weighted javelin, and then when he closes to almost point-blank range, he should stop again and then throw his heavier pilum lead-weighted javelin, and then and only then should he draw his principal weapon, which is his gladius hispaniensis. Yeah, sure, it's quite fairly established that the Romans did use, it was standard tactics for the Romans to throw the javelin. It is also true, though, that as you yourself said, the Romans just used testudo because they were receiving missile fire in a split second after the Germans are all over them, so I don't know if they would have had enough time to do that. You know, testudo is a great formation, and we know that it was used to counter enemy
fire, excusing the term, or missile weapons, although usually they did it when the enemy had superior firepower to theirs. It's not like every single time that the Romans were thrown missiles onto them, they will go into the Testudo, because the Testudo makes you significantly slower and you can't maneuver as well as you would in regular formation. So we don't exactly see all the nitty-gritty details of the situation. So I don't particularly have a huge problem with the Romans not being able to throw the javelin. Maybe at least one. But as I say, we don't have enough data to really comment on that.
The sword that is being used there actually by Maximus, by Russell Crowe, is also accurate, because it's not a gladius infantry sword, which is a stabbing weapon more than anything. The cavalry were on with a spatha, which is a longer weapon, giving greater reach, so you can reach down and start smacking people from the saddle. So the sword he's using there is actually accurate.
Actually, no, that's a gladius. That's not a spata. Or spatha, if you want to say it in English. In Latin, it would have been spata. It's not. It really looks like. Am I wrong? I mean, I'm going to ask you for confirmation, noble ones, but to me, that looks just like an infantry gladius. So I don't know where he's seeing a spatha. A spatha would have been significantly longer. And also, he's not mentioning the leather bracelets that I freaking hate and everyone wears on this movie as well. I'm not gonna dedicate a chunk of this video to that, because I've got a dedicated video link in the description to my rant. But it's strange that he doesn't mention it, because leather bracelets shouldn't be there.
Terrible weapon, the Gladius Hispaniensis. Didn't have any blood runnels, so there's no way for the air to come out of a wound, and no way for the blood to run out of a wound either. So therefore, when the sword went in, it was very difficult to take out. So you had to give it a massive twist, which created a terrible, terrifying wound. So it was a psychological weapon.
Oh, I can't believe he said that. Do what? Now I see why you noble once linked this to me. Now it's fully evident. He's talking about the massive myth of the blood runnel. I can't believe it. So, where do I even begin? In a lot of medieval swords, so later swords from this period of time, you see that there is a part missing in the center of the sword. How much is missing and up to what section of the sword will largely depend on either personal preference, on the type of sword we're talking about. But anyways, that is called a fuller. A fuller does have some nicknames, like he's saying blood runnel or blood groove, some people call it, but that's a nickname. And because of that nickname, a lot of people developed this idea, which has been completely debunked, and I can't believe that an expert would say this, given he's not a weapons expert, I understand that, but still, this myth that once a sword enters your body through a stab, the purpose of the blood groove would be to, as this guy is saying, I don't know, get the blood through and avoid some sort of vacuum. What did he say again?
Terrible weapon, the Gladius Hispaniensis. Didn't have any blood runnels, so there's no way for the air to come out.
There is no way for the air to come out
of a wound, and no way for the blood to run out of a wound either. So
and no way for the blood to come out. So air and blood, supposedly, by what he's teaching now, to how many people? Oh my gosh. Blood and air need a blood groove to come out.
Therefore, when the sword went in, it was very difficult to take out, so you had to give it a massive twist.
Can you really imagine this with me? Like every single time a Roman stabs an opponent, the sword is supposedly very difficult to come out. And I mean, you can clearly see that this guy has never tried to stab ham, or even watched a video of people stabbing ham with a good replica of a gladius. And then imagine Roman soldiers having to twist every single time, and that is because of the air and the vacuum that is created. No, it's not. It's been completely debunked. It very much depends on where you are stabbing. Usually Roman soldiers, the way we understand it, is that they would try to aim at the guts, they would try to aim at the belly, they would try to aim at your throat if they were lucky and could place a shot like that. But, you know, you can't always be that accurate in the midst and chaos of battle. So if it did happen that the sword did get stuck, it would have been because you would have encountered bone. Maybe you stabbed a little too high, or perhaps it got stuck in part of the armor of the opponent or in a shield, whatever. But if it's in the body we're talking about, usually it's because it has encountered bone. But there is no vacuum to overcome. That is not the reason why fullers were made. The reason why fullers were invented was to, generally speaking, decrease the overall weight of a sword, and also in a way to influence a little bit the point of balance. But in general, it was to make a blade more nimble in the hand. because you're basically removing some extra metal from the core of the blade, from a section that it's not going to compromise the overall structural integrity. You're removing extra metal, if you will, from a section that is not going to create any problem, that way lightening the blade. If a blood groove or a fuller was absolutely necessary to be able to allow anything that stabs to come out of a wound, then the teeth of a lot of different animals would have evolved fullers, just as a matter of deductive logic. Also, let's talk about this psychological weapon thing, this terror weapon. Every weapon is, look at this little javelin point of bronze. Would you like this to hit your eye? No. Hence, this is a psychological weapon. Like, literally, every weapon is a psychological weapon. You don't want any weapon. And the gladius was scary because of the wounds it could create, and also because it was a fast weapon, so it was difficult to block and parry. If the fact that the gladius was missing a fuller made it a psychological weapon, then why did they invent fullers in the first place? Because it seems like it's a good thing that the fuller was not there, because then you had to twist and create an even worse wound. But if you wanted to create an even worse wound, why don't you twist anyways? And I'm sure this guy has had his fair share of reading the authors, and no author whatsoever from the Roman period ever mentions the soldiers having to twist. No one. I'll tell you what happened here. He must have heard this story, this myth. He was told this probably, 30 years ago. He heard it, he thought it sounded cool, it made sense in his head, and so he started repeating it. I hope he's not repeating it to his students wherever he teaches, because again, this is one of those situations where we need to be kind of careful when we listen to experts, because yes, they're experts of their own things, but I'm sure he's an expert in Roman history. I'm not attacking the guy, but he clearly isn't an expert in weapons, and he clearly isn't an expert in armor either, including the period that he was talking about. So,
portraying, I have to say, Commodus in an incredibly fantastic way, captures the madness of the man. I would say Commodus. There are a lot of Roman emperors who are mad or bad, but Commodus is the one who is mad and bad.
I'm not sure that I think they overstated it. They had him strangle his own father, and that didn't happen. They also had him fight in the arena to death and die, and that didn't happen either. He was strangled by his own trainer in the bath.
So the important thing to remember here is that a gladiator is a slave.
In the majority of cases, yes, but a gladiator is not always a slave. I've already talked about this in my top 10 myths about ancient Rome that you thought were true, and this idea of a gladiator equals a slave. It's not always the case. I don't know why people say this. I don't know why he's saying it that way, because we do have documents and we do have historical mentions of people that decided to voluntarily become a gladiator. Given it's a minority compared to the amount of people that were forced into gladiatorial combat, but it also shows us that a gladiator was not always. It's not an 100% one-to-one a gladiator equals a slave. Some gladiators were volunteers, and so they just decided to become a professional fighter. Maybe because they needed money, maybe because they were good at it, maybe because they owed money to some dangerous people, but some people did decide to become gladiators on their own.
So certainly Roman soldiers may have found themselves in the arena as gladiators, and then have been very good ones because they're trained soldiers. Fantastic.
Would the training received by a Roman soldier turn him into a very good gladiator? I'm not 100% sure that you could transfer all skills. What I mean by that is, would an American Marine be a very good MMA fighter? It depends. I'm sure there will be some soldiers that are also really good at hand-to-hand combat, but then again, a lot of the skills that you're taught as a professional soldier you can't actually use in the context of fighting. In my opinion, this is just, I'm not correcting him, this is just to dive a little deeper into this question that I think is a good question. I think a Roman soldier would have probably been a better fighter because it would have been fitter and he would have been already accustomed to fighting, although that would depend on how much of a veteran we're talking about here, and that would be the same as the example I made with the American Marine. Is this a veteran that actually saw real combat, or is it a recruit? Because that would make a difference. Let's say that it's a veteran we're talking about. He would definitely be a better fighter than someone who's just a slave and has just started to be a gladiator. But if we're talking about a top tier gladiator, then I think he would fight better in the arena than a Roman soldier. Just like a professional MMA fighter in an MMA octagon, not on a battlefield scenario with all the battlefield weapons, but on an octagon, I think he would be the better fighter in that case, because he's trained to do that. So I think it really depends on the person, it really depends on who we are talking about. I wouldn't say that every single Roman soldier would be an excellent gladiator, particularly when compared to professional gladiators who did it for many years and knew exactly very well what they could and could not do in the arena. Just a little food for thought. I will dive a little deeper on the linguistic side of it, but I'll do it towards the end of the video because I know that not everyone is interested. But if you are interested into the language part and the sort of Latin discussion, stay until the end.
Really sort of like hits my mark where I want at least 50% to be accurate historically, and a lot more is actually accurate historically. Some bits are wrong, but particularly based on the initial battle scene, which is fabulous, I give it 8 out of 10.
Yeah, no, as a film, I thought it was a great film. I enjoyed it. I watched it twice. I don't always do that. And definitely there are some things that are interesting, like the fact that he has got a tattoo marking the sign of the Legion, although again, the way they represented it, I'm not really sure that was the best way to do it. I have a dedicated video to that. Link in the description. But as I say, as a film, it was very entertaining. 50% accurate even says a lot more, which means a lot more means 80% accurate. No, I don't think so. But then again, I'm not an expert, so I don't know. Let's continue.
I don't think this is a very good movie, okay? But aspects of it are very, very good, and one of the best aspects is the recreation of the town of Pompeii.
We'll meet you back at the villa.
Milady!
That's interesting. One thing that I would like to note is that in the movie, in the film Pompeii, I watched it a very long time ago, but one of the things I noticed is that we could see there was a toga being worn, maybe two, so the clothes of the rich, particularly on specific situations I'd like to underline, but I'm also noticing that the overall choice of colors that I see in the tunics seems to be okay. The one thing that I'm noticing is that there is an overall lack of sleeveless tunics. There still is a sort of, this is something that happens in historical reenactment too, whereby we like sleeves as modern people, and so whenever we are presented with a choice between a sleeved tunic and a sleeveless tunic, we tend to go for the sleeved tunic. But in the Roman period, it would have been more common to have sleeveless than to have sleeved. Sleeved existed and some people used them, but as I was saying, as far as we understand from the archaeological record and the iconography, the way we understand it is sleeveless would be a bit more common, and I would like to see that reflected into the movies. That is one thing that, together with the sort of fabric being used, and again, the sort of colors that would have been common.
You see, actually, this is a terrible movie, in my opinion, but another thing you see very accurately here, which you really feel oppressively once you know where you're looking at, is the proximity of Vesuvius.
I mean, Vesuvius is quite close even to Naples. When you can see it on particularly if it's a clear day and you're in the right side of Naples, it's right there. But yes, from Pompeii it would have been even closer, of course, and I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely. Being from Italy, maybe I should have underlined.
There you can see the huge amount of panic caused by this eruption. What we do know now actually is that quite a lot of people had already evacuated Pompeii because there'd been telegraphed that there were going to be problems in the days before the event, because there was a series of earthquakes and they could tell that the volcano itself was likely going to have some kind of eruption.
And also some people didn't even evacuate because we know of people that literally probably died of smoke inhalation, and other people who were like too sick, they just stayed in their home and they died in there. People, as you know, being preserved. It's fascinating stuff.
Several meters, tens of meters of volcanic ash and dust and waste and detritus. Much of the city.
I actually didn't know the English had the word detritus, because in Italian we say detriti, but I usually see it translated in English as debris with an English accent and debris with an American accent, but I had never heard detritus. So pretty cool. Usually the words that are closer to my native tongue, Italian, tend to be the big words in English, which is kind of funny because when I was, just to give you a little If you don't want to hear this, just skip it. But just to give you a little interesting anecdote of my youth when I was a teenager in England, is that I remember that my other teenage friends who were English, oftentimes whenever they would run into a word that they didn't understand because it was a big word, such as, I don't know, presumptuous or peculiar, proficuous, words that they didn't know what they meant, they would ask me, even though I wasn't native, because those words, being big words, were very similar to the actual Italian words that I would normally know, like proficuous is proficuo, peculiar is peculiare. So I already know those words and I would explain them to them. It was actually quite funny that a non-native would be able to explain the meaning of words because they were big words, and so they were most of the times coming from my own language, Italian. In a way, it kind of made me feel like I was an ancient Roman explaining them like that. Yeah, even though oftentimes these words went into English through French, I understand that, but then again, French got it from Latin, and Latin was born in Rome, so still the same thing. The words originated in Italia, and to me, they're very natural words. I would imagine something similar would have happened perhaps in the medieval period, when some words would be used mostly by the aristocracy and maybe some of the native people, when it was still kind of detached into two different languages coexisting, which is really what happens in medieval English and Old English, if we think about it, when it's like being still sort of merging together with Norman French. And in a way, we still see this double nature of English in modern day English, because if you think about it, you've got words for animals that are clearly related to Anglo-Saxon, meaning the Germanic side ancestry of English, such as pig, cow, calf. But then the equivalent, when we talk about the meat, is instead connected to French through royalty and therefore Norman. And in a way, then it connects back to Italian and Latin, because you say pork, beef, veal. And that is because, again, the aristocracy could eat it. But again, the aristocracy was French, but the regular people that were minding the animals, and therefore the animals have their etymology into the Germanic side of the language. It's fascinating. It's a mirror into medieval society. Wow, Ben-Hur, we're going all the way back. My dad loves Ben-Hur.
This is a movie I'd probably end up watching, even if it's only wallpaper. It's on television, probably twice a year, actually.
Just like my dad.
To free people in Italy was probably 1 to 10.
I'm actually glad he said Italy, because people usually attack me when I say Italy or Italia when talking about the Roman period, and I'd like to take this opportunity to say there is nothing wrong with saying, I need to see if someone in the comments actually commented about it, because usually you always find people saying, Italy only existed for 160, 170 years, you shouldn't use the word Italy/Italia for the Roman period, and that's nonsense, because even though politically speaking Italy as a modern country, Italia, didn't exist for obvious reasons, I mean Garibaldi and whatnot, still Italia as a term was used constantly in the Roman period. It's everywhere. We're talking about hundreds of entries in the literature. So again, these are the people that complain about the usage of the word Italia or Italy to mean the geographical area are people who have never read one little minute page of a book of ancient Roman history, because it's everywhere. The Romans used it. Now, given the definition of what encompassed Italia, of course, changes with the period up to a point whereby even Sicily at one point becomes part of Italia. It's not always the case. But then again, even though geographically speaking that changes, the word Italia was used it's a period word, and it's absolutely fine to refer to the geographical section of Italy as Italy, even when you're talking about the ancient Roman period. And also, even the word Italiani existed in the period, is just that usually Italiani as a people, in the very beginning of the usage of that word, only meant a specific population of the southwest. But that, again, will change. Still, nothing wrong with the usage of Italy. Oh, the eagle. Yeah, I have a dedicated video, link in the description. Lots of links.
And they've got the right hand accurately, very, very good. Right hand accurately. You can see also very accurately how high up the pommel is of the Gladius Hispaniensis, actually, and that's to allow it to be drawn in a very specific fencing technique, so the blade flips up.
Okay, first of all, that's absolutely not how you wield a Roman shield. So again, it very much surprises me that an expert on Roman history, again, I understand he's not an expert on Roman weapons and armor, but as you can see, he specifically talks about fencing techniques, and yet he doesn't know that the way you hold a Roman shield, a scutum, is a briefcase hold, because it's a center bossed shield. Shields held like this, even though some do exist in the historical record of, and we do see them in some iconography, they don't represent the shields that were used in battle by the Roman legions, and therefore the idea that he's doing the specific techniques, and by the way, even if the pommel of the gladius was further down, you can still do the same technique. I've done it with the gladius being up, with the gladius being too low. It doesn't matter, you can still do it. So that also is something that probably makes sense in his head when he's trying to imagine something that he has never done, and therefore I don't think he should mention this. But still, this as a representation of how you hold a Roman scutum, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Also, he's not mentioning the kit. In this movie, they are wearing leather lorica segmentata. The lorica segmentata was made of metal. I know he mentioned that in the previous movie, Gladiator, but since in this movie it's specifically made, they chose to go with a leather lorica segmentata, which some people did support, but has been debunked, and no one really believes it in academia anymore. I would have mentioned it. Lorica segmentata made of leather? No. Even though the origins of the word lorica does come from its root, and etymologically speaking from the word for leather, that doesn't mean that by this time, when they invented segmentata or laminata, however you want to call it, then they would have been made of leather. They weren't.
Formations holding, this is elite military training, using elite military equipment of the day, very, very, very well represented in a movie.
But why are they going into testudo if the opponent is just, apart from the fact that they are running like crazy and trying to jump on top of the soldiers and getting stabbed for it, so already that is not a good representation. I just can't imagine people just being that suicidal against the Roman legionaries. But still, why are they going into testudo? I understand in the first movie, but why are they going into testudo here? They are going for hand-to-hand. The regular formation would have worked perfectly for this. There is absolutely no reason. No missile weapons, and testudo makes everything harder from a movement standpoint, so I just don't get it. He says it's excellently executed. I say they shouldn't go into testudo when they're going for hand-to-hand.
Movie. And with the narrative of the movie based on Rosemary Sutcliffe's book, making it a really, really good watch. Even for a Roman military historian like me, who can get very picky, I just think this is fabulous.
I don't think you're being picky. I think I'm being picky. I know some people don't like me being picky, but as you can see, that's what people ask when you do reviews. I don't think he's being picky enough.
And they're now reforming while in combat, which elite military troops, including legionaries of the Principate, could do.
And the Republic, to be specific, not just the Principate. Interesting that he says Principate, because again, if you want to use, it's weird that he uses it's kind of weird to me that he says Principate, Principatus if you really want to say it in Latin, or Principate if you want to say it in English. He's kind of doing a mix.
Legions being freed, told to pick up a weapon, because you don't want to carry anybody when you're in a military situation like that, with huge amounts of jeopardy.
It's cool that they're going to the circle. I know that there is specific mentions in the historiographic record of legions using the circle, usually at a bigger scale when it comes to the actual battles that they did this, but it was done, so it's cool that they recreated that. And I don't know if they did it because there is a historiographical record mentioning it. I would assume so, but that's pretty cool, the circle thing. It's pretty cool though that they show the Britons still using chariots, because chariots by this time, even though they were a sort of Celtic type of war technology that was used also in the continent, so by the Gauls, for example, by this time this would have been completely abandoned and no one was using them in the continent, but they were still using them in Britain, because Britain of this time was frozen in time. they were still doing things both from a religious standpoint and from a tactical standpoint on the field that no one was doing anymore in the Celtic side of the continental Europe. But because of the fact that, you know, Britain was detached from the continent, they preserved some things that were not used anymore, and they were still doing them. So it's pretty cool that they show the chariot, but this is the way you should interpret this. Even from the Roman perspective, it would have looked like, for us, someone using some battle techniques of the, I want to say, 18th century. Anyways, I think that's the end of the review, I suppose. So again, I'm not trying to attack this gentleman. I'm sure he knows his stuff, but I think it kind of shows us one thing that is important to keep in mind, and I would like you to also learn this from this video and apply it to me as well. When someone is an expert, although again I'm not an expert, but when someone is an expert on a specific field, it doesn't automatically transfer that expertise in every single possible field, even if they're in a way connected when they talk about that specific topic. So in this case, we could see that definitely he knew his thing when it came to the actual relating the events. So he knew very well how the boats, the ships worked, and of course he could place certain specific historical people within their time frame. But when it comes to military, and he speaks a lot about weapons, armor, what you're supposed to do in a military context, and being an historian does not make you an expert on these things. And from the linguistic side of it, you can tell that he has zero training in Latin whatsoever. So and I've seen this happen a lot, and this is the part that I wanted to talk a little bit about historical reenactment. I noticed that historical reenactors, particularly when it comes to Roman period, when they are teaching something, because they do, oftentimes when you have these like historical reenactment events, and then there are a lot of people that are not reenactors that come and see, and then these reenactors are explaining things, they're teaching, and it's a great thing because you're wearing the gear, you look like you know, a lot of these kids are good, some are bad, but then again some are good, and then they're teaching you stuff, and that's great that they do. But then again, they also teach you, and this is I've heard people saying this is a gladiator. Oh my gosh. So I'm saying, if you're teaching the words in Latin to people that have no training, if you also have no training, I think you shouldn't do that. Perhaps just ask someone who has had training in Latin and classical Latin to teach you how to say these words. Again, no one is asking you to learn Latin, but maybe the whole language, but just learn the words that you use and teach to people, because otherwise you'll have a lot of people going around and repeating, including a professional historian, lorica segmentata. And personally, I don't think that's good, particularly in a teaching context. When you teach, again, you're not supposed to be perfect. I made my fair share of mistakes, but at least it's important to correct those mistakes, because if we keep sort of spreading these ideas of the blood groove and all the Latin is mispronounced, and we say things about military equipment that are not correct, then these things will be, again, taught by other people, particularly if you're an expert on something, because when you're an expert on something, then people sort of assume that you're also an expert on anything else you ever talk about. And in this case, we could see that, again, I have nothing against this gentleman. I'm sure he's very, very professional in his own things, but there are clearly some areas where it comes to language or military equipment, swords and weapons and shields, where he clearly has no idea. So I thought that it was a good opportunity to have some fun and review some of these things. If I said something wrong, please correct me, and you know that I always apologize publicly, and I always admit my mistake. Thank you very much for watching, as always, noble ones, and please don't forget to use the link in the description box. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.